everybody. My name is Demet Tunc. I'm leading the Customer Experience Council at the Conference Board. Today we have a webcast where we will talk about customer journeys, and I have a very interesting speaker with me. Before I introduce you to my speaker and to the content of the webcast, let me update you on a couple of housekeeping rules. Today, while you participate in the webcast, you can ask questions via the chat box that appears at the bottom left of your screen. If you want to view the presentation on full screen mode, you need to click on the 4 arrows that appears at the right top of your screen. At the end of this webcast, we're going to ask for your feedback with a very brief evaluation form. We would be very happy if you could fill that in. We would encourage you to share this webcast with your colleagues within your network who are interested to hear more about the customer journeys. I would like to remind you that by joining this webcast, you can earn CP credits. To be able to do so, you need to stay online throughout the whole webcast and click on the pop-up boxes that will appear 3 times during the webcast. All right, so Arjen Bonsing, welcome Arjen. Arjen is an expert in omnichannel marketing and also in retail. He has more than 25 years of experience where he has developed his career in marketing, retail, e-commerce, CRM, data analytics, everything that relates to the customer piece. He has developed a model on customer journeys, and today he's going to tell us about that model and how that model, the theoretical model, is actually transferred into the real life by viewing the customer point of view, reflecting that into our business. He's also the founding partner of Customer Journey Experts, where he helps his clients with their challenges. Welcome, Arjen.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you. It's very nice to be here.
We are very happy to have you here.
Okay. We're going to talk about customer journeys, and what I would like to do, what I would like to start with, is a little animation that shows that customer journeys are actually about people. And there's a lot to do about customer journeys and how complex they are, but actually they're pretty simple. We all can do a customer journey. Every individual can do it, and we do it every day, all the time. We think customer journeys are not only about the money people spend, but also about the experience they have during the journey and the amount of customer buy-in and customer satisfaction you can create. So for us, the customer journey in our model is not only the financial value you take of it, but also the value you create in customer satisfaction and the recommendation value customers bring along. So based on that starting point, we developed a different kind of approach. You often see that customer journeys are symbolized in a way of a circle in a process where people come back at the same point as where they left off. We think customer journeys are actually more of a sinus, that you have an initial purchase process and then an interval between 2 purchases, and that you then have a repeat purchase where you actually have much more information of people at hand. So that's where we based our model on. And if you look at the image we see here, and you can see the full model and all the underlying details on my personal site, arjenbonsing.com. The model is publicly available. And then you see that we distinguish 6 steps in the initial journey phase. We're talking about orientation, that's the gray part, selection, that's the brown part, transaction, that's the yellow part, delivery, that's the green part, and customer care, that's the orange part in the journey. And actually what we have done, what the model describes, is what customers are looking for in each step of that journey. And nobody goes through all the steps and always in the same fashion, but we detected and described all the stages people can go through within each step, and that's what the model is based on. So there's a lot of theoretical background, which we won't go into detail today, but that's what the model is based on. And then if you have had the first journey, you actually come back in the second, at your second purchase, you come back in the same kind of steps, but in these steps you know a lot more about people. You already know who they are, you already know what they bought, and you can turn the process into something really much more personal, into really a more personalized experience.
So what you're saying is actually it's the series of interactions that the customers go when they interact with your brand, with your product. And what you're saying is it's like a sinus, it's not like a straight path.
No.
That the customers interact with your product, with your brand, with your solutions, with the service that you provide.
Yes, and they have to go, you have to know, you have to be aware about the existence of a company, and you have to be able to find on a website, you have to find your way, the proposition has to be attractive, and then you start selecting your product. So it's always a kind of process you go through, but it's based on your the personal needs of the consumer. And what we see a lot is that people design a journey, and that's a one-size-fits-all. And what we see the world is moving to is that those journeys become much more personalized and much more based on who you are and what you have done and bought in the previous time you were there. So if you know that people, for instance, if you're a fashion retailer, and if you know what size what size a specific consumer has, you can also only select the products that are available in their size. But you can also, during the transaction process, tell them if the fit of that specific item matches the actual size you know of them. So you can personalize journeys if you distinguish an initial process and a return process, and then you can build much smarter journeys, and you can really personalize those journeys.
You can personalize the journeys at each and every single touch point.
Yeah, and for each and every customer.
For each and every customer.
So that's the real challenge.
So that's where the data piece comes in, I think, right? The analytics part.
Yes.
And which is a big challenge for the companies, because there is so much data available, but the challenge for the companies is to convert this data into meaningful actions and interactions with their customers.
Yes, and actually it really starts a little bit before that, because and that's the little purple dots inside the lines inside the model. That's about the opt-in. You have to acquire an opt-in, and especially in Europe, where we're here in Brussels today, you know, there's GDPR in Europe, and actually you can see it as a burden, but you can also look at it as a huge benefit for companies, because it enforces on every company that's active in Europe to give full data control to the users. But it also requires that you have to explain why you should need the data. And if you can make that relevant, then it's no problem for people to share the data, and then they have a benefit.
Yeah.
So
only if the consumer gets value out of it, then they would share their information with. If they don't see any value out of it, why would they share all that information? I mean, who would care whether I'm small, medium, or extra large?
No, if well, I can, and if I ask you your clothing size, and the next time I do nothing with that information, why should you provide it? Why should you provide your birthday, which is a pretty common question? If nobody ever does something with it, then the question should have been, are you over 18, and not the personal depth of what is your birthday. So acquiring that opt-in already involves a good thinking of what you're going to offer our customers and how personalized you want to make the relationship. And that's pretty much where we look at the individual age. And this is another animation. where you can predict that simply by looking at history, we are now entering a very new era, which will which will mean a very huge change in how marketing works. And in history, always technology has been the driver of developments in the retail and services area. Without the elevator and the escalator, you would never have had department stores simply because you couldn't reach the second story. So and the same goes for transportation. I mean, airplanes made it possible for formats to travel across the world. So you got these global brands, and now we're entering the world of artificial intelligence, IoT, machine learning, where you can really become smart and personalized with consumers and in the interaction with consumers. So what you will see going on the next couple of years, and that's should be a real worry for a lot of companies, is that this technology will drive the future of retail. And this is the reason why all the big tech companies, and the Amazon of this world, they're actually data-driven companies. They're not retailers per se. They do, as Amazon says itself, they do retail by accident. They're actually a data and technology company. And the same goes for Google, and the same goes for Apple. So they understand the meaning of data, and that's what they are really pushing for. And if you look at a customer journey from that respect, then the initial part of the journey already is designed to capture data of customers, to get involved with them. And the first purchase is the start of a continuous relationship. And that's where the Sinus comes from, where you get more personalized with consumers during the journey, and you can create environments that are really personalized based on previous behavior. And actually that's not rocket science at this point, and it's also very important for the valuation of companies. The value of Amazon is not really based on the sales volume of them today, and it never was. That's the reason why I never cared about making profit. What they did is they invested in relationship with consumers, and now they have a 60% market share in the US on online sales, and the future potential of all those customer relationships, that's what determines their value, and that's much higher than the actual sales they do today. So there's a very different business metric on these new companies compared to traditional retailers. If you look a little bit deeper in what they're doing, then we'll take some examples. If you go to Spotify, you've got your personal playlist, and you get your weekly recommendations on music, and actually that is based on your listening history. That's based on the music you selected and you listen to. So this is where people get used to. They get used to personalized environments where your music selection is created by Spotify, and they suggest it, but they're not really pushing you in one funnel. You can also select discoveries in musical genres you didn't select before. So they really
predict.
They don't put you in a funnel, because that's quite often what people think that this data analysis does. But if the customer need is your starting point, if somebody wants to be surprised, Spotify can also surprise you with
selection of
things that you might like, but not what you already have listened or are already used to. And it's not only Spotify; it's also Netflix. Netflix can predict with 98.5% scoring, that I probably like this movie or this new series, and that helps me hugely, because my watching behavior is pretty much based on the suggestions of Netflix. And I start to expect, and customers are starting to expect, those things to happen
on a regular basis
for
every
experience,
for every journey they go through.
Yeah. If this is my...
It's the life cycle management, actually, for the customers as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, it's and not only the life cycle. It's also about well, Netflix not only looks at the series and the content you watch. They also manage the images they show you, the previews of the content they have. They are also based on your personal profile. Mm-hmm. So each single movie's got 5 images. And those images are also tailored to what you click on. So they also enhance the behavior and the click-through based on the understanding of what you like. And well, this is another example of Netflix, but also if you look at Google, Google is tailoring its environment completely to what you're doing. Their location-based service. It's not. If I ask where the closest grocer is, they know where I am, so they don't have to ask me in which city I'm looking. They know that it's pretty much near me. So what you see is that those environments, step by step, it's so personalized, and I grow so used to it, and you grow so used to it, and every consumer grows used to it, that we start to expect every company to deliver real tailor-made services. And what we see in our practice is that for some industries, you see that 70% of the visitors is returning customers, but the opening screen is the same for everyone. And they're not the Netflix like who's watching, but you have to fill out a login and then go to somewhere in the right upper corner and fill out your personal details. It's not an automated process yet at many companies, and that's where we see that the world is really changing. And if you translate that to retail, then you obviously get to Amazon, who's really ahead of the masses there, and with their incredible personalization of their content. They know what I've bought, they know what I probably might buy next time. They know which items probably run out of stock. So they really start to become my companion in shopping, much more than just a retailer. They offer me subscription services on products I regularly use, and they take over the stock management for me. And that makes it really hard for other retailers to compete with the enormous data insight Amazon has, mm-hmm. and the capabilities they developed to provide those kind of services.
Arjen, you're referring to the retailers. Are the steps in customer journeys differ hugely amongst the different industries?
No. The interesting part of our model and our business is that we those journeys and the simple set of orientation, selection, transaction, delivery, customer care.
It's the same
that's
for
the same for every product or service. Mm-hmm. And even your insurance actually is a subscription service, mm-hmm. And you have to renew it, or it's get renewed automatically. Mm-hmm. But it's a subscription service, and mm-hmm. you go through the same steps. And you can personalize that process in the same way. And it also goes for B2B. In B2B, the only difference is that the conditions for somebody to buy are not only his own, but also set by his company. But if you target the content, even in B2B, on the individual user, somebody who's working in a workshop might need other content and other products than somebody who's working at the office of the same company. So you can diversify the content and that what people see based on what they do and what they need and what they've done previously.
It could be more solution based in B2B.
Yeah, but actually it isn't different from what Amazon does with my cupboard. It's the same thing. And Amazon also provides content based on the products I use, and that's what you see in B2B as well. You can add the services or the instructions how to use materials, and you can target that content based on what you know about your customer.
So what you're saying, that's what you said at the start of your speech. You said it's not rocket science, it's pretty simple, the customer journeys, but the people approach to it, or the businesses, it's actually quite complex, because once you define the journeys, there are all the derivatives of those journeys.
Yes.
So is there an optimum number of journeys, or is it like endless? You can create as many journeys as you want.
Yeah, it is. There are as many journeys as you have customers, and some steps are the same, and sometimes people take the same steps, but on other moments they take different steps. So you need quite a different approach to that, and that's what I can show you in the capability framework you need. This is a rather complex image, but I'll try to explain it. What you see, if people want to buy something, they have to go through a journey. Any which way, they don't have a choice. They have to go to a store. They have to and most often they use various devices during the journey. So you have to monitor the behavior on all these devices. The usual setup of companies, and that's what you see in those colored layers here, and if you enlarge the image, you see that above these colored layers, there's a lot of interactions. If you look at the journey, there's a lot of possible interactions. If we look in our business, if we look at the analysis model, we've got 2,200 checkpoints, which are all individual interactions during a journey. So there's a lot of interactions during the journey, and what most traditional organizations are structured like is that there's a marketing department that's responsible for all marketing activities. There's a buying organization that's responsible for the buying. There's logistics, and it's all actual layers or pillars within the organization. And all these departments have their own data systems, their own reporting systems. So they don't actually have a unified image of the customer. And that's where the real change is. If you start to acknowledge that there are journeys, and there are very different journeys, there are multiple journeys, and that's what most companies are now discovering, and that's what your question is about. How many journeys are there? How many personas do I have to create to develop journeys on? That won't be the solution for real personalization. Real personalization means that you understand that these departments are only relevant in certain steps of the process, and that they have to cooperate with each other in these steps to create the best possible customer experience. And you have to have a unified image of the customer about all his interactions on all steps of the journey. So you have to create an environment where all customer data gets together, and that's what this image shows. And then it suddenly becomes a process where you have all these different interactions, where you need all these different departments to create the best possible experience at that point of the journey. And if you start doing that, then you don't design journeys for personas, but you use personas to design functionalities. Functionalities that you make available to customers or push to them as soon as you discover that that is their need. So if you enter that website and you just want to browse for a new item, and you haven't got a setup plan that you want to have a white formal blouse, then you offer them inspirational content, and you create a long and inspiring journey for them. But as soon as you discover that they're really on a functional purchase trip, you can change the environment and provide them with the real functional information. So based on their interaction pattern, you have to be able to present them the content that's relevant at that point. So if you don't create journeys for personas, but use the personas to develop functionalities that you can make available to them at the point that you notice what they want, then well, you just create interaction assets that you can bring forward to people based on their need in the process.
I mean, it's quite interesting because you're talking about end-to-end experience in a customer journeys, which requires cross-functional collaboration.
Yes.
However, most of the time in the companies, we see that performance-driven metrics, KPIs, are not always reflecting the end-to-end experience, but they are more structured in a silo-based model where people are set for KPIs, for metrics that are relatively important for their own function. Yeah. So what would be your approach or your advice to these companies to see the end-to-end experience, the customer journeys that avoids these silos and that brings the company performance from the customer point of view?
Yeah, actually that's the next slide. What that requires is that you have targets on individual customers. Once you start thinking in what do I want with this customer, then you can answer that question. And then the metrics is not what is the tick through on this step in the process, or I run an A/B test on because I see a lot of drop off at this point. You have to have a much more holistic view on customer behavior, because if you only judge it on those single items and single interactions, then you don't notice that that same customer that drops off at that point on his mobile enters the process on his desktop and finishes the transaction somewhere later. So you have to you have to become aware and have to organize data centered around your customer. So you have to get to the point where you have individual objectives for individual customers. And then it gives you much more flexibility, because then at that point, not every item has to have the same price for every customer. Just like in your chair in the airplane, you pay something different for it than I do, based on your flying frequency, and that's what you will see in retail as well. And you already start seeing in retail that promotions are targeted to you and not to me. But it requires that you have clear objectives on an individual customer level.
So actually, the customer journeys should be the ones that are defining the metrics, the KPIs, the performance criteria, not the other way around.
Yeah,
actually, it's also the customer journeys that define the operating model, the governance structure of the companies.
Yes, okay. That needs to be on the highest level. You have to understand what is the number of returning customers, what is their spend, where do they drop off in the process. If we do our journey analysis, the purchase analysis we can do from outside in. We behave like a customer and go through the entire process. But we also, at our clients, link it to the conversion data in the process. And most often we find that that data is not really accurately available. And if we start looking for, okay, this is the initial conversion funnel. What's the conversion funnel for? What does the conversion funnel for a returning customer look like? Then it's most often we find that people can't tell you how that looks like. The data is simply not available, and at top level there's not the KPIs or the steering criteria to manage that process, and that's becoming that's becoming essential, because as explained earlier on, the value of Amazon is based on the potential value of the customers. So that potential value of the customers need to be the concern of top management.
So there's a direct correlation, a very direct correlation between the customer journeys and the performance of the company, the business outcome.
Yes, the business outcome. And what we see now is that there's a lot of talking about customer journeys and what involved, and a lot of customer journey mapping. But it's much more holistic. It requires a fundamental change, that you start thinking from the customer's perspective. And if you do dialogues, and this will be enhanced by the rise of voice and interactive dialogues, which are based on that. If you start talking to people, you have to have the objectives clear. You have to understand what their needs are, and you have to know how you can help them best, and how you can create a better involvement, a higher customer satisfaction, and a higher returning sales on these customers.
This also requires continuous innovation in the systems.
Yes.
You can't be standing still. You need to innovate continuously to be ahead of competition.
Yes, and you can pretty much predict, and that's why I show the model of looking back on history. You can predict that IoT and artificial intelligence and machine learning are going to drive this business. So every retailer and service organization that's not hugely investing in understanding the data, but also learning to translate these insights into actions. They're not going to make the next step in development.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So.
And how would you start a customer journey process? What would be the approach? Would it be more top-down? Would it be bottom-up? Or would it be the combination of both?
I think it's the combination of both. If I look at the clients and projects where we are really successful, then what we do is that we benchmark their performance with their direct competitors, but also with the international leaders in that category. And translate these outcomes and translate the scoring of that, because you can score it in our model on the 6 initial and the returning journey steps. But also we can provide the operational organization with what are exactly the touch points where you stay behind. And what we see, and that every company can do that, is benchmark your own performance with the competitors and the leaders of the pack, to understand where they do things differently, where they're more advanced, where they give a better user experience, and so you have to define what are my top level priorities and criteria, and what are the KPIs I steer on. That's that you have to decide on top level, and on the operational level you have to understand, what are the aspects, what are the elements, and not on that single part of my silo, not only the orientation or the content strategy, but how does the content strategy affect the total conversion and the customer value creation you do. So at the top level you have to set the customer value creation parameters. What is it? What do you want to achieve with your customers? What do you want to achieve in terms of sales? What do you want to achieve in terms of customer satisfaction, which is actually a better metrics than the Net Promoter Score? And what do you want to? What do you reach in terms of conversion and conversion optimization?
So what you're saying is actually every individual in a company has the responsibility to increase the customer satisfaction, to increase the retention rate,
yes,
to increase the NPS.
Yes.
From the truck driver that delivers your products to the CEO of the company.
Yes.
But it's easily said, but I don't think it is that easy to set up all the performance criteria for all the individuals to make them more customer-centric.
Yes.
Everybody is talking
right.
about customer centricity, but and it's
no. You have to redesign your organization, or at least if we look at the successful companies, what they do is they create a kind of metrics organization where people get involved on the customer journeys while working in their silo, but they also get a responsibility for a kind of customer segment together with people from other departments. So you get a group of people from all departments involved in that customer journey that are responsible for that particular segment, and not only in a work session or a work group, but also in terms of their reward or their actually responsibilities for the outcome of the results on that specific group. Only then you get the involvement of all those departments you need to create a end-to-end journey. So yeah, it really involves thinking differently in your organization.
okay. All right. Well, quite interesting. I would ask the audience if they have any questions, and I may want to borrow your screen, Arjen, because okay. If there are any questions from the audience, you may want to type that in the chat box that appears at the bottom left of your screen. While we wait for some questions, let me also remind you that we have more webcasts that we're going to talk about customer centricity, customer journeys, customer obsession, and we will also talk about growth leadership, always from the customer point of view, focusing on the customer. How does this affect the organizations? So if you are interested in a series of webcasts, please feel free to go to the website of the conference board and find more about it. I have a question. Do you recommend working with customers to create customer journey maps through design thinking?
Yes, at a certain point during the process, we take quite a different approach. We benchmark the performance based on a expert view, and we do that for a reason, because our customers only know what they know. So in countries where Amazon isn't available, people don't know what the prime proposition of Amazon is. Once Amazon enters that market, people suddenly raise their expectations on what they want. So we always advise people to look at an expert view, from an expert perspective, at your journey. But once you start designing journeys, then you have to use as much possible input from customers as you can. And actually, we are very keen on not only doing that during the development of a journey, because the interaction is about, I can ask you what you like. I can ask you if you like this conversation, and I get feedback, and I can use it immediately. So yes, in customer journeys and customer journey design, you would like to use the input of customers. But in our experience, it works better when you bring up an idea about what you would like to offer them, instead of asking them, because then they have to imagine themselves, and based on international orientation, you can create a lot of suggestion of what you might do, and then ask people whether they would like it. But even better, you can ask them, but also try it. You have to do a lot of testing and a lot of learning in designing journeys. and you actually should be very flexible in developing and implementing functionalities. And I earlier on mentioned that you have to measure customer satisfaction. We always advise people to monitor customer satisfaction, not only by NPS at the end of the process, but during every journey step. If you start thinking about having dialogues with customers, you can ask them, did we help you with what you were looking for? Was this the right sizing advice or the right sizing guidance? And you can also turn it into a question, well, can we do it better, or would you like it better if we did it this way? So that actually is a fundamental change.
Okay, so you would involve the customers in the design thinking process.
Yes,
while you're developing or implementing the customer journeys, designing the customer journeys.
Yes,
okay.
And also in the optimization, and also in, but I would always suggest that you bring suggestions to your customer. If we would do this, would you like that better than this? And then have a conversation. And
how do you do this? Is it through focus groups like the traditional way, or is it through online? Because we are swimming in a huge amount of data.
Yeah.
The data is there. Yeah. And but how do you use the right information that comes from the customer?
Well, the right information is actually what they how they behave. So you can see what they're doing. The problem with market research is that people are not always telling what they're doing and not always doing what they're telling. So the interesting bit about online is that you can see what they do, and you can monitor what they do. And with the development of the tools, you can also detect the sentiment of people from the way they click or the way they talk. So we're getting smarter and smarter on the amount of data and the usage of data. So it's not only asking them, but it's also very much looking and analyzing at what's going on in the process.
Okay. Well, Arjen, it's very interesting because you've developed this theory, which I know that a big consultancy firm has bought it from you.
Yes.
And you did not stay there. You even further developed it. You keep on innovating, and that is very interesting. All right. If there is not any more questions from the audience, I also would like to tell people that I'm leading the Customer Experience Council for the Conference Board, which is a peer networking group amongst the senior executives. So if you're interested in joining a peer networking group and to be amongst peers to talk about the challenges that you go through across the industries, please feel free to get more information on the Conference Board website. Okay, I would also be very happy if you could fill in the very quick evaluation form so that we develop ourselves further for the future webcasts. Okay, very interesting. Thank you. Laura Young, one of my council members. Thank you for joining. Okay, Arjen, it's very interesting to have you here. Okay. And I hope we keep in touch, and I hope we hear more about customer journeys in the future from you.
Yeah, well, they're evolving, and there's a big change going on, and I think voice and interactive dialogue are really going to change, are really going to be the next wave of change. And I think that everybody should really be aware of what's going on, and the importance of customer data to improve your business and to create customer value.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, and thanks to you all for joining.